Hey everyone, Josh here. So today we're doing a timing belt on this CJAA TDI. So it's very similar to the video I did with the CKRA, but the fuel lines are a little bit different. It's got an auxiliary fuel pump, so it's a bit more busy in there. So I just thought I'd do a quick video on that. There's a couple other tips and tricks that I caught on after doing a few more. I'm already a few steps ahead. I'm just doing some repairs on the front end, so the coolant's already drained out of here. There's not really a nice way to do it on these cars. You can drain out of the lower rad hose, or this connection down here gets most of it, but you're still going to make a mess when you pull the water pump. So we're going to go over some tools that you need and the kits for the actual timing belt. Okay, so you're going to want just the regular Torx Allen triple square bits, hex bits that you normally have. Special tools, you can get away with just a crank lock. The Metal Nerd one's very nice. And then 2 L pins, so you've got cam lock and pump lock. So it's nice and simple. As far as what you need for the actual kit, I've got a Geba water pump. It can be plastic or steel impeller, whatever you prefer. I'm not too picky. I've got an INA timing belt kit. So it's an INA belt. Same thing, it's all the INA tensioner, idlers, all that good stuff. I ordered this from ID Parts, so this came with all of the one-time use bolts, the tensioner stud, and also all the one-time use bolts again. So lots of bolts. And then also a serpentine belt, so that way the old one, if it gets wore or whatever, it can jump off and go into your timing belt and make it skip. So do a new one of those. So I'm doing the shortcut method, so I'm leaving the engine mount on here, so I'm going to walk the tensioner out with the stud. I like it that way. I don't have to try and support this engine up. I've got small hands, so they fit in there nicely. Okay, so up top we got some parts we have to rearrange. So DPF pressure sensor, so you can unbolt it there, slide it ahead, and if it's still hooked to your DPF, you can just kind of push it out of the way. This isn't, so it can just go over here. So we got coolant lines, so I might just take this ball out of here. It's gonna make my life a little bit easier. I've already got this line off because I just did the thermostat. So yeah, I'll get rid of this. And then as far as fuel lines, we've got pressure from the tank, return to the tank. We've got inlet to the booster or auxiliary pump, and this is return from the high pressure pump. So ideally, if you're opening these lines, you're going to need a way to bleed them again. So VCDS or OBD2 or OBD11, I mean, that can run both the in-tank and this auxiliary pump to make sure everything's bled out good. I'm going to do a separate video on that, on how to change it with and without scan tools. So anyway, so I'm just going to undo it here and here, move these lines over, and then I'm going to get this pump right out here, and same thing with the filter. You can kind of move stuff over out of the way, but for the 2 minutes it takes, it makes life a lot easier getting down into this area, especially when you have to film it. Okay, so nice easy work. You want to make sure you keep the fuel lines clean, so I just kind of tuck the ones from the tank, from and to the tank up there. We've got this line here, which originally went to the return from the pump and the injectors. So I just kind of stuck that back together. This has to get filtered yet, so I'm not too concerned about that. And then the one that would go from your auxiliary pump to your high pressure pump, I would recommend not touching it here, or else you might end up breaking this because it's plastic fitting with a short little rubber. It's a bit of a silly design. So you can undo it from the pump there itself. So once that's done, all you've got left is this connector on the back of the pump. That's out of the way. So we're going to have 2 M10 triple squares to get the pump assembly up out of the way. And then the fuel filter, we've got 10 mil, 10 mil, and 10 mil way down there. And then you can get all of this out of the way. Makes life a lot easier. Okay, so with all that out of there, there's a pile of room in here now. I'm gonna change my mind. This is gonna stay. It's not in the way. I imagine some flat rate guys will just kind of slide that out of the way, but it's really nice being able to get in here nicely. And I'm not flat rate, I charge what I charge, so it is what it is. Well, this is my wife's car as well, so I only get paid in beer, so may as well make my life a little more enjoyable. So top, I'm pretty well happy how that's set up. So now we're gonna go underneath. So I've already got the fender liner out of here when I took the front clip off. So now we're gonna get this dampener off of here, and this is always a nightmare. So this car's got 165,000 miles, and this is the original belt. So I'm gonna guess this dampener's never been off, and as you can see, it's pretty rusty. I always have a hard time getting this off. It rusts to the hub, and you can't really pry off this bottom shield. So it works okay is if you get these bolts out, kind of take emery cloth to this hub here, and then tap with a hammer, and then try and gently pry a little bit on it. It's not much fun. That's got to be the easiest dampener I've gotten off. So basically just tap the insides here a little bit, and then yeah, just a gentle pry bar in there and out it comes. So next we're gonna get this timing belt cover off. So it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's one up there. So just quick and easy, pop them off, and then the covers, there's a bottom piece and then the top piece. So get that out of the way. Okay, nice and easy. That shield's out of there. We got lots of wiggle room now. So just so happens I'm actually really close to top dead center already. But I want to crack the high pressure fuel pump bolts and the cam bolts loose right now. So that way I don't have the counter hold. So I'll just crack these loose without having the timing tools in them yet. And then we'll get this set in time. Okay, so I've got them cracked loose. I just kind of put them back down finger tight. So now we're going to set it to number 1 top dead center on the compression stroke. So with this at roughly 7 o'clock, you know 1 and 4 are at top dead center. But since the crank turns every 2 revolutions for one of the cam and the pump, you need to make sure we're on top dead center of 1 compression and not 4 compression. So to find that out, quick and easy, is this window is going to be facing up at roughly 12 o'clock. So then we're going to insert the tool through here, and then there's a little fork with a hole down here. So I know I'm pretty close to being where I need to be. So we're going to start with the crank lock first. So it sits like so. So you've got threaded hole, and we're not going to use them. That's just for storage. So bolts are going to go through there and there. And then on that front main cover, you see that little hole? And that's where that slides into. So we're going to get that bolted up, get that locked into top dead center, and then we're going to look at the top, the cam and the pump. Okay, so the bottom end is locked, so now let's do the top end. So a little inspection mirror works really nice. Your girlfriend or wife's makeup mirror also works good. But so there's, I'm not sure if it's going to pick it up here, but there's a fork. You just see the 2 tangs right there. So anyways, so you got the 2 tangs, and then you got a hole in the aluminum cover. So your pin should slide in there. Not quite 100%. Okay, so the issue I've ran into the last few of these was this hub gets, or the sprocket gets seized to the hub. So even with these loose, you should be able to put a pry bar on there and move the pump, which in turn would move that fork so that you could time it. This sprocket is seized to it, so I'm not going to worry about locking this up yet, but we're going to do the cam gear here next. So same type of deal. You use a mirror and make sure that it's actually lined up with the hole in the head. It's pretty obvious to see the nice round hole that it's supposed to go into. If it's really far out, you can end up putting it just into no man's land and not actually be timing it or locking it. But I don't think it would run very well in that case. So you should be able to see the hole. If it's not close enough, you can just loosen these bolts. And same kind of deal, push the pin in like that, and then just use your pry bar and just kind of walk that hub around until your pin slides all the way in. Okay, it really didn't need a whole lot. Like it was pretty close to being spot on, but it's got to be 100% on. So just a little bit of a pry, and that's locked up. So up next, we're going to loosen off the tensioner. So you're just going to throw a wrench on there, and then that thing should fly back. Okay, so it needed a little bit of persuasion, but it's loosened off, so the belt's nice and loose here now. So I'm going to take the idler out of here, the idler out of here, and there's one down underneath the mount as well. So I'm going to take all 3 idlers out of here, and then get this belt out of the way, and then we're going to worry about this tensioner. Okay, so we got the belt and idlers out of there. That was nice and easy. So up next, we're doing the tensioner. So with the mount on here, doing the shortcut method, you have to get pliers onto this outside edge, or inside if you prefer, and basically walk the stud out with the tensioner in the way. So it's not the easiest thing, but it's not too bad. So these Knipex, they call them water pump pliers, they work pretty good. So you can just get in there and bite on and walk it out. Okay, so I got the stud threaded all the way out. And then you just gotta kind of shimmy the tensioner out with the stud. Maybe down's the way to go. I don't think so. I think it's just a bit harder to do it while filming and there we go. So you're obviously replacing this stud, so that's why you order it in the kit. So then up next, we're gonna get this water pump out of here. So there's gonna be like 3 bolts that hold it on, just little 10 mils. And then usually the O-ring gets stuck into the block. So if you can get a hammer, and usually if you hit it with a hammer and kind of knock it out, you can pry a little bit, but you don't want to break the plastic, so you got to be really careful about that. Okay, I got the water pump knocked out of there, so everything's going really nice. And everything's actually in pretty good shape, surprisingly. So maybe Volkswagen should extend the timing belt to 200,000 miles instead of 120. But yeah, I think the one idler was a little growly. But I'm just joking, that should definitely be done. So anyways, so up next, we're gonna get this pulley freed up. So you're not wanting to try and pry on this pulley with the lock in, because you will break these tangs off of it, and then it's gonna be a pain to tie in the future. So I'm gonna pull these gears out and then pull these bolts out and then try and pull the gear off. Okay, so it really doesn't take much to get that popped off. So nice curved pry bar. Get it underneath that lip there, and then off of that one bolting point, and then just a little bit of force, and you can kind of wiggle it. Come on. There, so you can see all that rust built up inside of there, so that's going to stop this pulley from sitting where it needs to be when you go to tension the belt. So we're just going to take a bit of emery cloth and clean this up, so that way we can get this timed correctly. And then this is also a good time, you can get this pump sitting where it needs to be, and then you can lock it in place. So I'm going to do some prep, and then we'll be ready to go back together. Okay, just like that. Pulley can move nicely, same with the cam gear. So the reasoning that all stuff needs to be able to move is you've got it locked. So if this is seized solid and it won't rotate, when you go to tension the belt, everything from here down to the crank will be loose. So then when you go to actually bar the engine over, it's going to be out of time just ever so slightly, and the belt will be slackened off a bit, because then after you rotate it, the slack will kind of work its way back. So again, you need to make sure all this moves freely. So we're good. So up next, we're gonna get to start putting stuff back together. So I gotta clean up the water pump area. All right, so we got things kind of cleaned up a little bit. Got the new water pump in, so we're gonna start putting new components in here. We gotta put the tensioner with the stud on it the same way. So that's your lower idler. This is your tensioner stud. Right or wrong, Might put a little bit of blue Loctite on there where it goes into the head. That way it just doesn't back out on me. So if you're doing this at home, you need a torque wrench. So this precision split beam works pretty good. It's 10 or maybe even 8 to 50 foot-pounds. And then if you order your kit from ID Parts, get the torque poster with it as well. So they've got a code, I think it's poster or something, like a coupon code. So this poster is free if you spend, I think it's $50 or $100. So comes with all the torques that you need for that, as well as a bunch of other just general info. So it's a nice poster to have. Really should be up on the wall somewhere, but that hasn't happened yet. Okay, so I've got the tensioner in where it needs to be. So I've got this nut snugged down just to kind of hold everything in. So you want to make sure the tensioner tang is in the plastic housing where it's supposed to be. Let's get this camera's mirror in here. It's not going to focus very well, but you'll see there's a little plastic window. That's where the tensioner tang needs to sit in. So if you don't get it sitting in there where it's supposed to be, you can end up bending this tang. As you can see, there's a lot of meat or a lot of material hanging out there that's not really supported. So if that's not sitting where it's supposed to be, you'll bend this or it'll break, and then there goes your nice new tensioner. So then up next, we're going to get this tensioner slackened off all the way. So basically how we're going to do that is we're going to make this nut just snug. The new tensioners, they have a window for the actual tensioner. So that's a 6mm Allen that goes into there. And then just in front of it, you'll see that little slotted window. And that actually fits an Allen in there as well. So what you'll do is you'll stick an Allen into that little slot and then basically rotate this ahead, just like if you're tensioning the belt. And then, I don't know, if you put that pointer into about the window there, that should give you enough slack to be able to feed this belt in where it needs to be. Some styles are just like a slit in here, so that's where you use the triangle tool or a 90-degree pick. That works as well. But yeah, you need two hands to kind of rotate this ahead, hold the Allen key in there, and then you need to snug this nut down to kind of hold it there while you feed the belt in. Okay, so we're going to catch some of this on the camera is the plan. So then you grab your 6mm. We're right about where that window is there now. And you gotta get in there with a wrench. Doesn't need to be anything too crazy. And just like that, so now we can feed the belt in here. This is slackened off as far as it'll go, and that gives us a little bit more wiggle room. Okay, so we got the tensioner set there. That way you get the belt on. So this is my second try. So I like to set the gears kind of in the center of the hole or maybe just ahead of it. I was a little too aggressive on the back, so once the belt was all on there, that was at the back of the window. So the reason I say center or maybe just a little bit ahead, so with the crank locked down there, the tensioner is going to be taking up all the slack. So once we tension it, any of the slack is going to turn this belt this way, and that should in turn pull these gears just ever so slightly backwards. So that should be in the center of the window, and that'll be pretty close to the center of the window. And that way you've got a little bit of adjustment either way if you need to be advanced or retarded after it's all back together. So I'm going to put this idler on here yet, and then I'm going to get my Allen back in here so I can loosen the tensioner off, get this Allen key out of here, and then I can actually tension it. So you can technically just loosen this off, but that's going to fling the tensioner back, and I might be okay for it, but I don't want to risk hurting that tensioner because that's what keeps your belt tight. So I'd rather take the tension off with the Allen key and then loosen everything off, get that spare Allen key out, and then tension it properly. Then one thing I kind of forgot to mention, I'll feed the belt down, loop it around the crank, and then I'll try and assemble it on the front side, keeping the belt tight around the water pump, around this idler, and around here. That way if you've got too much slack here, you're really going to get this rotating when you go to tension it. So you want to try and keep the front side of this tensioner as tight as possible, so that way most of the slack's at that tensioner and at the lower idler down below. It's a fairly snug belt, like with all the tension off here now, so it's not like you're fighting teeth worth of slack. There's just a little bit, so it's not the end of the world. As long as you've got a little bit of adjustment on these windows, that's the main thing. Okay, so now we're gonna tighten it. I just got the camera pointing at the tensioner. So I've got the bolts loose, just kind of sitting there on both of these, the cam and the pump sprockets. So with your Allen bit in there, I got that bolt just a snug too tight. We're gonna go till it's just into that window there. Got to get a different bite here. So yeah, about center of that window. And while it's kind of sitting here, just snug her up. So there's enough tension there now to kind of hold it in place. And that's that. Okay, so the downfall of doing the shortcut method with the mount on still will be torquing this tensioner stud and nut. So that is tensioner nut, so 15 foot-pounds plus 45 degrees. So if you look in there, you're not going to get a socket and a torque wrench on it. So a way around that is get a crow's foot and put it 90 degrees to your torque wrench. So then that is true 15 foot-pounds. And then I'll throw a wrench on it for that 45-degree torque turn yet. So if you put this straight out, the torque wrench isn't going to read accurately. So you need to put it at the 90 degrees. There is math you can do to figure out what it's going to be torqued at if you have it straight out, but 45 works just as well, if not better. And then rotate the engine over 2 revolutions, so we're back to where we are here, and make sure everything stays in time and that nothing has to be adjusted. So I'll do that off camera here, and then we'll double check and see how everything's checking out. Okay, so we're back top to the center. I got the crank locked. The tensioner, that's just to the front of the window, but I'm gonna be okay with that. The crank or the cam is pretty well spot on, but the pump, let's see if I can get this. The pump's just outside, like not quite where it needs to be. So I'm gonna loosen this off and get the pump set back where it's supposed to be, and then should be ready for the first startup. All the locks are out, so now we're gonna do the torque turn for both of these pulleys. So I just snug those down so they're not going to move. I want to take all the locks off because it's going to try and rotate a little bit. I don't want to either break the fork here, break the head here, or break the aluminum front main cover there. So I just prefer to take all those tools out, and then that way I can torque them or do the torque turn. So this thing's looking a little bit more like a car here now. So I got everything where I'm happy there now. So we're gonna fill up the coolant. Sometimes I'll vacuum fill them. So there's a little tool. You put the whole coolant system under a vacuum, and then it just sucks all your coolant right up. That way you don't have any air bubbles. You don't have to worry about it overheating, anything like that. But these systems are pretty foolproof. Fill it full of coolant. Let it get up to temperature with the cap off. And then usually once the thermostat opens, you'll get this will usually get sucked right down, so you just kind of top it up as need be. So you don't really get airlocks too bad on these, so I'm not going to worry about vacuum filling it. The fuel filter, I did a new fuel filter. I primed it, so when I had that whole system off, it leaked all the fuel out of it. So you're gonna want to make sure you get this primed correctly. These pumps are known to go bad, so whether that's from air or just bad pumps, who knows. But anyways, so we're gonna get some coolant in here because I'm trying to get this AC filled up. Okay, so we got the ball filled up, got our dead jumper pack on the dead battery here. So let's do the first startup. I guess it's too dead for that. Okay, so we got the TDI outside boosting it. So we should be good to go here now. Looks good to me.